Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us on our sixth and final webinar celebrating the recent release of the International Handbook of Self-Study. My name is Laura Kennedy. I am one of the two web managers for the Self-Study SIG. And knowing that you are joining from all corners of the world, let me just say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. We are so thrilled to have you with us, either for the live webinar or for the recording that will be on our SIG's website. Tonight we have some amazing presentations around self-study in languages and cultures. And before we introduce the presenters, let me just do a couple reminders. One, if you are joining for the live session, in the chat window, you'll be encouraged to sign in on a spreadsheet where the link is in the chat. And that is one, so that we can know who's here and who we're connecting with, but also because our publisher Springer is giving away books for participants. And so by signing up on the spreadsheet, you are entering for a drawing to win a free book from Springer. So make sure you do that if you are joining us live. And if you are joining us live, also know that we are recording. So it's up to you whether you want to leave your camera on or off. During the whole group discussion time, we will stop sharing our screen so that we can talk to each other, much like in that Brady Bunch kind of waffle image of everyone on the call. So please stay muted now during the presentations, but during the Q&A and the conversation, we encourage you to unmute, engage with us in conversation through the chat window or through conversation. We want to hear what you have to say. We want to share ideas and really build community with all of you. With that said, let me switch over to Julian. Do you want to say something about the webinar series as a whole?
Yes. Welcome, everybody. Sorry, I just feel like I lost my video. Just switch a few things here. Welcome, everybody. It's delighted to be here for the sixth and final International Handbook of Self-Study webinar. And we're really delighted to have the sixth section focused on language and culture being presented today. There's some really wonderful work here and some work that really exposes self-study in different places and in intriguing new ways. So I think you'll enjoy that. Thank you to Lynn and Hafdis for arranging this and for being excellent section editors. Thank you to Laura and Eliza for organizing this webinar series. It's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes to make this effective. And we deeply appreciate all that they're doing for us. The handbook is 1,500 pages, over 54 chapters on different aspects of self-study, methodology, theories, different subjects, teacher ed, higher ed, self-study in different countries, challenges of self-study in other languages. So I really encourage you to just view this as a sampler and to get a hold of the handbook, maybe through your library, or ask your library to get a copy electronically or hard copy. There's some really wonderful work, and it's really the work that is useful to be citing in terms of self-studies that you might do for the CASEL conference, AERA, submitting to studying teacher education, and so on. And with that, I turn it over to Lynn and Hafdis to get us started.
Thank you, Julian. I'm Hafdis Guðjónsdóttir, and my co-author is Lynn Thomas, and we are here, the both of us, and we will introduce our section. Just to show you, I put on a map and put on the 11 names of the countries where the authors come from. And then please just continue, Laura. This section is called Self-Study Across Languages and Cultures. And the authors in this section, they share the challenges and the creative processes of researchers from a wide range of nationalities. They also share, I would say, new insight to self-study research for everyone. When we were planning the handbook, it was kind of obvious the first 5 sections, what we wanted, how we wanted to organize that. But when we were discussing, I felt something was missing, and I had been discussing that with Lynn, how it is to come from a different culture and a different language and how to introduce self-study in our countries. We had a seminar at ARA where we presented about that, our challenges. So we proposed if we could have a section on this. I'm not sure that everyone was agreeing. Some people thought it would be better for us to have a separate book, because some of the people that were going to write those sections were maybe not those famous experts in self-study, but more people who were taking their first steps. But with the support of Julian and others, we got to have a special section for this group. And I must say thank you, Julian, for supporting us. It was just, I'm so happy that we got to present how it is and all the challenges we have to go through when we have to present something in a different language. In this section, we can listen to the voices of how different groups of people in different contexts have overcome challenges, found ways to improve their practice, and make the process work with their linguistics and culture communities. And then the next one, please. The researchers in this section have faced challenges of translating self-study or teacher education practices research and transform it into comprehensible scholarly languages that is accessible to the wider STEP community in a variety of different ways. One thing that we noticed in every chapter is that the term self-study is not translated, that in many countries, the researchers are speaking their own language, but then you can hear they say self-study in English. And this has been quite a challenge for all of us to figure out what can we call this in our language, in our community. But you will also see in those chapters the power, the possibility that self-study brings. There is evidence of transformational self-study research practices to fit with local cultures, like in the chapters from South Africa, from Korea, Japan, Israel, Iceland, and really all of the chapters, you will see this. You will be able to listen to stories of revolutionary change in languages and cultures, and how that is inspiring, because the researchers have had to work very hard to adapt what they are reading or hearing about in the literature or at conferences, and then they bring it to their home country and try to tell others about it, and people don't know what you're talking about. They have had to work hard to make self-study practices make sense to others linguistically and culturally within their own scholarships of tradition. And I would say that just reading those chapters, it can help us all learn more about what makes self-study effective. Next, please. This is just a picture of all the chapters and the names of all the authors. And you can see, if you have seen the handbook, you can see this is the colors of the handbook, blue and white, and the blue, white, and red. And the red ones are the chapters that we are going to introduce today. And I've been talking a little bit out from the chapter Self-Study Across Languages and Cultures that Lynn and I wrote, and it's the first chapter. And now I would like to ask Mieke Lunenberg to tell us about self-study in a couple of countries in Europe, please.
Hello, I'm from Amsterdam. I'm Mieke from Amsterdam, and I'm happy to tell you something about self-study methodology in Europe. The next slide, please, Laura. What we wanted to do in this chapter was to tell something about self-study in Europe, the way it contributes to the professional development of teacher educators, to international knowledge base. And before I tell more about what we studied and published in this chapter, it's important to know that Europe has 50 countries, even more cultures, and more than 100 official languages. So it's not so easy to get an overview of what's going on in Europe. What we have done is focusing on countries where there is an active self-study community, and also a community that has published the work they have done internationally, and in practice that means has published their work in English. We have used the following sources for this chapter. First of all, we have looked to contributions from Europe at the Council Conference, starting in 2006. So that's the year after the previous handbook was published. We have also looked to European contributions to STE from the beginning on, the first edition in 2013. We have sent an email to all ARE STEP members asking European STEP members to contact us about their work. And of course, we have used our own network. Can we go to the next slide, Laura? So this is our results. First of all, there are a few publications from Czechia, from Scotland, from Norway, but there are not really self-study communities there. They are from individual persons. Then in Belgium, there has been an interesting self-study community, and Eline van Das and Geert Keltermans have published about their work there around self-study research, but at the moment, that community is more or less sleeping. So there are 4 countries where there is an active community, and that's Iceland, Ireland, England, and Netherlands. And so you can see the authors next to the map. Elizabeth and Joy are from England. Hafdis, you already saw her in this webinar, is from Iceland. And Anne and Mary are from Ireland, and I have written the piece about the Netherlands. So if you want to know something specific about the 4 countries, you really have to read the chapter, because I will tell some more general findings. Can we go to the next one, Laura? Yeah. I think to give a kind of context, it's important to know that from 2013 on, there was more and more interest about development of the professional development of teacher educators in a more global sense. Because that was the year that the European Commission wrote a report about what was the state of the art about professional development of teacher educators and making plans for Europe. So in that context, there was also mere space for example, self-study research. Then it's important to realize that in some European countries, and I think that was especially the case if I look to when I look to our four countries in Iceland and in England, a strong tradition already of action research. I think a lot of you know the work of Jack Whitehead around living educational theory. And then it's important to know that in Europe, in several countries, and I know that was the case in Iceland and also in the Netherlands, that in the past, when a lot of teachers became teacher educators, and teachers in our countries don't have all an academic background. A lot of them have a professional educational background. So when they become teacher educators, carrying out research is something new to them, and self-study as a form of practitioner research is then an attractive way to start with carrying out research. Well, what did we found in those four countries, in our four sub-studies? I will tell you something about it at the next slides, Laura, if you can put that on. First of all, and I don't think that will surprise you, we found that cooperation and working with critical friends was important in all four countries. I think what is interesting that in Ireland, they have a kind of mentoring system for people who are new, teacher educators who are new to self-study research. And in the Netherlands, we have in the last decade done some self-study trajectories. And what we found was that there is established a kind of bonding, a kind of trust with people who are new to self-study research, but often have a long experience and an extensive experience as teacher educators, that if they find out that the facilitators have also ideas about pedagogical approaches, it creates a kind of trust and bonding. So we found it very important to think about how do you organize meetings if you have self-study trajectories or mentoring meetings. Then in Ireland, they also started with asking people who are new to self-study research to start with writing short professional publications before starting with academic publications. And that proved to be very helpful too. And then there's the issue of language. I think that's important not only for Iceland and the Netherlands, but I think for more countries where you start with self-study research and English is not your first language, because language and culture are related. So, and I know that was the same in Iceland, and in the Netherlands we found out that we have to find our own way with self-study research, something that fits in our country, where we can find the right words to talk about self-study research in our own language. And in that context, it's also important to publish about self-study research in national journals and in your own language, because I think that's the way to spread self-study research further on in Europe. And I think that's the same for other countries where English is not the first language. Finally, because self-study research is not widespread already in Europe, international cooperation with the USA, with Australia, where there's a long tradition from self-study already, is important. And I also want to stress that the Castle Conference proved to be very important for European persons who start this self-study research, because when you don't have a budget for research, then it's only a half-hour flight from the Netherlands to England, and you can buy a cheap ticket, and then it's a wonderful experience to be part of the self-study community if you are able to go to the Castle Conference. I know from people in the Netherlands, and I'm sure that will be the same for people from other countries in Europe, that it was very important for their work and for the further development as a self-study person. Well, having said that, and to wrap up, if you want to know more about the professional development of teacher educators in the Netherlands, I have been starting the International Forum for Teacher Educational Professional Development together with people from Norway and England and Belgium in 2013, and we have done a lot of work, and in May we will publish the book you can see about our work in the last 8 years on research, on professional development, and also on what we have done to ask more attention from for policy in Europe with regard to the professional development of teacher educators. And we also start some webinars about our work starting next week. So if you are interested in the professional development of teacher educators in Europe, you're welcome to apply and read the book or come to the webinars, or if you want to know more, you can also always send me an email. Thank you.
Thank you, Mika. And next, Jonina and Karen are going to introduce the chapter Cultivating Self-Study, Developing a Discourse to Better Understand a Particular Culture.
Yes, thank you, Hafdís. I think we decided that I just go through all the slides.
Yes, Jonina Valavitte.
Yeah,
you.
okay. Yes, yeah. So there are 5 of us, I and Karen Svanborg, who's also here, Edda, and Hafdís. You can turn to the next slide. The purpose with the study was to examine how the methodology of self-study of teacher education practices developed in Iceland and strengthen our professional foundation. Self-study was developed in English-speaking countries, and most presentations of self-study are in English. To deeply understand our practice and present our studies, it's critical for us to not only do so in foreign language such as English, but also in our native language, Icelandic. To create an understanding of the methodology and to underpin our foundational self-study, it's important to create a discourse in our native language that we can use to better understand ourselves and our practice. An essential element in self-study is the use of dialogue in the process of coming to know and understand the practice. And in different linguistic and cultural contexts, it's fundamental that this dialogue is responsive to native languages and related to the local culture contexts, as well as the language with which the research might ultimately be presented. We initially came to be as persons through our first language and cultural context. Our identities are therefore closely connected to our native language, and it's challenging to explain our knowledge generation about our practices as teacher educators through self-study when there is no or little discourse of self-study in our main language. You can now turn to the next slide. To understand our experience of translating and transforming self-study from English-speaking context to Icelandic language and culture, we decided to begin by organizing a focus group meeting for the 5 of us over lunch. In planning for the meeting, we agreed that each of us would bring a dish, and while preparing that dish, think of ways in which it was representative for our self-study journeys. Placing the dishes on the table, we were curious to see what each of us had brought. As we sat down, we decided that we could circle and share our experiences of translating and transforming self-study in the Icelandic context while we tasted the dishes. We also expanded our gaze on this story by collecting themes and issues that have emerged in our collective self-studies, and to give an extended insight into how self-study of teacher education practice and the language of it developed in Iceland. Writing about our self-study at different times helped tracing this development. We can now turn to the next slide. Two intertwined and interacting main themes emerged: the language and developing a community of self-study researchers. The first hurdle we had to cope with as we began to develop a STEP community in Iceland was the language. In Iceland, there is a strong demand to use our native language and to create vocabulary for new professional concepts. We learned soon that the word "self" does not translate well and creates many questions and demands for further explanation. We have tried using different words and combinations of words to express our concept, always trying to convey to the professional ground the self-study practice is built on. Often, as we speak about self-study in Icelandic, we tend to use the English word self-study in the middle of the Icelandic sentences, as we had not found the suitable words in Icelandic. Recently, we have started to use the word starfstengt sjálfsrýni in Icelandic, or translating to English, work-related self-inquiry, to capture that meaning. Can turn to the next slide. At our lunch meeting, Hafdís brought homemade chocolates and told us the story behind the development of it and how it represents our self-study. She felt safe bringing it because she had been developing her chocolates for 40 years and has now a recipe she feels safe with. Made of good material that cannot fail, but to get there took a long time, a journey with many mistakes and tryouts. But she also explains that the work is now mostly in the hands of the second generation that took it to another level, and she hopes that the same thing will happen to self-study. She also brought a bread, a new recipe she was trying out to represent that we also have to take risks. We will try self-study methodology out, the vocabulary, the methods and presentations, and making it safe and trustworthy. Karen's preparation for this meeting represents her journey into doing self-study. She used a recipe of spinach pie and adapted it to the ingredients that she had available, but still adhered to the main ingredients and methods of putting it together. She got acquainted with action research and teacher research in her doctoral studies at the University of Madison. And in her work as teacher of Icelandic, she wanted to know how she could best teach deaf students to read and write, and wanted to find answers or methods on how to do that. Karen said, eager to work with others and present my ideas, I walked into walls in my school, and I didn't realize until later what was happening. I wanted so much to enter into conversations with my colleagues. Participating in self-study research in teacher education, discussing with others self-study researchers in Iceland, she has been able to ground herself in her study. And then you can turn to the next slide. The first story is about myself, Jónína. Beginning my teacher education career, I was fortunate to simultaneously teach in elementary grades. When I joined Hafdís and Edda to teach a graduate course on mathematics for all, we decided to study our own teaching. Participating in the self-study community in Iceland has strengthened me in studying my own practice, emphasizing inquiry and collaboration. In my doctoral thesis, I was doing research on 3 levels: a developmental research as I was working with in-service teachers to learn about their practices. Then there was the level of the teacher's own action research within the classrooms. And finally, what was my self-study, where I was developing myself in my profession. Svanborg, when she was a new university teacher, she got to know those self-study collaborating with Hafdís and studying their own teaching. Svanborg said, if I look back on how I experienced beginning with self-study, I started by doing a research with Hafdís on our course, teaching diverse groups of students, and that course. I had heard about this kind of study, and from the start it felt so sensible. But we lacked the words in Icelandic that properly covered the English concept of self-study. We used words like kennarar rannsaka eigið starf, which means teachers researching their own work. It was somehow as if self-study were banned words in our language, and we were looking for the proper words to use in Icelandic. Svanborg has found strength in the collaboration of doing self-study and developing teaching with Karen and Hafdís. And the last one on this slide is Edda. She described her experience of doing self-study research with Hafdís and Jónína within the teacher education. In her doctoral research, she was looking into her work with teachers in her own school. Edda said, I have been struggling with defining what I'm doing, what concepts to use for my methodology. In my mind, practitioner research is action research. I wasn't comfortable with using self-study as it often is about university teachers doing research on their own work. Edda was being confused about what to call her research, if it could be called self-study. Her understanding of the self-study methodology expanded through examining this dilemma. She found that the methodology is constantly developing and that there is room for different approaches and designs for research as long as you adhere to certain ground rules. Now to the final slide. The findings from our study reveal that our former experience as teachers in school impacted how we developed as teacher educators. Additionally, the collegial support we offered each other in conducting self-study had a major impact on our professional growth. The desire for developing as teacher educators conducting self-study research has had a major impact on our professional development as well as the way we discuss our profession in our native language. By presenting our work at conferences and writing about it both domestically and internationally, we have been walking the talk and developing educational practices according to our interpretations of our findings. It has given us a forum for critically reflecting on our teaching in two languages, on our way to improving our practice, as well as making these studies public. In striving to find words in Icelandic for discussing the methodology of self-study, our dialogue in the process of coming to know and understanding our practice has been essential. Reflecting on the meaning of the concept self in self-study has sharpened our own understanding of self-study and the balance between our professional roles and our ontological stance. Collaboration and inquiry into our profession as teacher educators and researchers has reinforced our community building and boosted our beliefs on learning as social activity. And these were my final words. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Jónína. And next is Meg with her presentation At the Dawn of Revolution in Teaching as Hybrid Educators Prospect for Self-Study in Japan.
Hi, my name is Megumi Nishida. I'm a Japanese doctoral student at University of Iceland School of Education. I'm so grateful to be able to share my stories with you today. And I first have to apologize for my cold and cough. It might be kind of disturbing sometime during the presentation. But anyway, in my handbook chapter, I discussed what was happening in the Japanese education system and teacher education in 2018. Through this presentation, you will find a past, present, and future of the self-study movement in Japan. Next, please. So the reason why I wrote this chapter, as a Japanese immigrant educator working in the Icelandic education system, I first wanted to explore how my hybridity could be a resource for my self-study. Then I wondered if there was any self-study conducted in Japan then. For this study, I set my research question as, how do I position myself in order to collaborate with the STEP community in Japan? So many things have been happening since 2018, and I also share my experience with the Japanese STEP community today. Next, please. To start writing the chapter, I first reflected on my education-related experiences through the personal history self-study method to understand how my Japanese upbringing influenced who I am today. Unfortunately, they were not as exciting as they could have been because competition was or is the center of their teaching education system, and the concept of reflection was negative to Japanese. They didn't look at positive aspects of themselves because it wasn't humble. So I wondered how they would be like today, and I searched self-study in Japanese on the internet in August 2018. Then I found a group of teacher educators. I first contacted the former university professor Nobuko Takeda to hear more about the current situation of teacher education in Japan. She also introduced me to Kazuhiro Kusahara, professor at Hiroshima University. Through interviews, I learned that some STEP researchers such as Mike Lunenberg, who is presenting with us today, and Alicia Crow, Fred Kortharten, and John Loughran have been invited and talked about self-study in the past. But why did they not leave any impact on the Japanese teacher education system? And yes, they did. They were just kept in their memories. So by analyzing, I discovered that there were two challenges for them to tackle in order to promote self-study: cultural difference and English language. For example, reflection in the Western context was too foreign for them to understand. Then English made it more challenging for them to keep connected with those researchers who visited Japan to develop further collaboration. And reading self-study literature was also not easy for them to understand in depth without having anyone such as critical friend to develop their dialogue for better understanding. So the Japanese teacher education system was at the dawn of education, revolution in teaching in 2018. To conclude the chapter, I suggested to my future position as their critical friend to support their learning about self-study with my hybridity between Japan and Iceland. So what is happening since then? Next, please. Their action was actually quite quick and efficient. Nobuko Takeda was translating John Loughran's research articles with her colleagues when I first spoke with her in 2018. They edited those articles into a book, then published in spring 2019. My Icelandic colleague Edda Óskarsdóttir and I were invited to talk about self-study in Tokyo, Hiroshima, and Hokkaido in June 2019. And as you see the picture in the top center, Hafdis joined us online. And Nobuko Takeda, Kazuhiro Kusahara, and Yu Osaka came to Iceland in autumn 2019. They visited our university and met people and felt the Icelandic nature. Right after she returned from Iceland, Nobuko Takeda organized the reading circle of Anastasia Samara's self-study teacher research book with 6 teachers and teacher educators, including myself. The Anastasia virtually visited us once online, and she has become a great supporter of our learning about self-study since then. Now the circle developed into a book translation project team with 19 teachers and teacher educators. The picture on the left-hand side is the screenshot from our web bi-weekly translation project meeting. Then Education Vision Research Institute, so-called EVRY, at Hiroshima University, has been running a series of self-study seminars, and I just finished my presentation about my findings from the 2020 Castle Conference book. Then Kathleen Pithouse Morgan and I are invited to talk about self-study for social justice and educational change to International Education Society of Japan in the end of March. It's almost overwhelming to catch up with everything happening in Japan right now. Through those interactions with my Japanese colleagues, I realized that those two challenges I proposed in the handbook chapter are actually a lot more complicated than I thought. They read English, and their university faculties actually encourage them to publish articles in English. And many of them speak English, but they need more confidence. As their critical friend, it is my mission to encourage them to believe in their abilities. And I'm the bridge between Japan and self-study community. And this handbook chapter writing was a real life-changing experience for me. So our book translation project is getting close to the end, and Every at Hiroshima University is also getting ready to publish the Japanese self-study book that consists of practices from the Japanese education settings. When those books become available to public, I believe that many teachers who struggle in their teaching find self-study helpful. I should be getting ready myself for offering more support for their future learning with my hybridity. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Meg. You're amazing. I'm not going to take much time, but I was going to introduce 4 chapters, but I'm just going to tell you a little bit about them. First, there are the chapters from South Africa and Israel. From South Africa, they tell us about how they were developing self-study community at the university and all the many hurdles they had to go through. But when they finished the chapter, they had a community, and this was really changing, and the community was getting more stable. A story, it comes again, how self-study is helping people. And then we have the chapter from Israel, a story of multiculturalism in general, of being part of the multicultural team and trying to be intercultural teacher educators. And that was the same there. By using the framework of self-study was helping them understand what they were doing and what they needed to do. And then just my last slide, there's a chapter from Chile where, and that chapter is about how they were trying to translate the work, similar like in Japan, translate the work of self-study into their language with the help of Tom Russell, and they tell the story there. So I think that chapter and the Japanese chapter are both very good at how to explain how we develop this. And then the last chapter is from Quebec by Lynn Thomas, who is explaining how she should be talking herself now. I shouldn't be talking for you, Lynn. Maybe
Sure.
you.
I'm sorry, I needed to rush out for a minute, but yeah, I can speak for very briefly because you've done a lovely resume of this. Yes, despite my obvious name and the fact that I'm speaking English, I do speak English, but I live and work in Quebec, which is a part of Canada that is French speaking. And my university, my colleagues are all French speaking researchers, and they were not at all familiar with self-study. And I have been trying over the many years that I've been there to introduce them to the ideas of self-study, and have run into many challenges Haftis has pointed out that when, and this has been a repeated theme throughout, that when we don't see a literature written in the language that people are working in, that it's very difficult for them to feel a part of the possibilities for self-study. And again, even in French, one would think that the languages are very close and that it shouldn't be too difficult. We still end up using the words self-study in English because there really is no good way of translating that into French. So my colleagues were somewhat interested in the ideas behind it, but I've not had any success in helping them to see the benefits of developing a community of self-study researchers, of working together, you know, at a program level, using self-study to examine our practices. There has just not been the development of research in French around self-study, which in some ways is curious because of how strong self-study is in certain European countries, including Belgium, which also has French researchers, but we really have not seen that development there. And that's part of what I suspect is that we will need to have an acceptance by people who work in other languages, in other countries where French is spoken, before there will be a more gradual perspective and acceptance of such an approach. Sorry about that. So it's very much at the beginning, and I would love to see and to learn from others about a good way of establishing that in my community at my university. But at the moment, I research with other members of the self-study community outside of my own institution.
Thank you, Linda. Now we have Svanborg, are you going to help us with facilitating the discussions? I can see there is one question already in the chat, and I'm going to read it, and anyone who wants to can then try to answer that one. What have been the most critical challenges you confronted with so far, and what would be the suggested modes to cope with them in your experience and perspective? Do you want to be here all night? Because this is such a huge question. Who wants to pick it up and tell us what is the most challenge with working with self-study in the language, the community?
Well, I do recognize the question, because in the Netherlands, for example, if you literally translate self-study, you will say in Dutch self-study, but self-study means that an institution writes a self-evaluation for an accreditation committee. So that's a real different association about the wording. So in the Netherlands, we explain self-study as teacher educators studying their own practice, and I know they do the same in Belgium. So I think that kind of translation is really very important. And what Lynn was talking about, I do recognize that too, because I think that in the European countries where I was talking about, a lot is dependent on one or two enthusiastic persons who keep things going on. So I'm not sure how things will be in 5 years, for example. It's not really institutionalized. So I think that maybe is a problem in more countries. You're mute.
Yeah, I can see that Karen is trying to put up her hand.
Yes, and hi, has been wonderful to be here with all of you. And I couldn't find, how I could raise my hand at the Zoom, but I would really like to respond to this question: what has been the most critical challenge you confronted in kind of resituating self-study in a different linguistic and cultural context? And I think the biggest challenge is kind of to exist or to develop and exist as a professional. And what has become crucial, and I think it's so explicit in Meg's work, is that you find the community, that you find the critical friend where you can actually begin to express these ideas in your own language, because it's so interesting how just being able to throw those terms and ideas and try them out, it kind of brings something alive within you. It's like you can really experience this professional growth. And just because we recently came up with this term, starfstengt sjálfsrýni, and I find it to, sound it's very nice being able to express that word. But I remember when we were first throwing this term between us, it was actually in ARA in 2013. And I was walking at the streets with Hafdís, and we were just throwing those, back and forth, and she came with this term, and it was like, this is something, this is something we can really use. And it's so nice now that we have written publication about it, and we see our colleagues really taking this term up. And we are actually being recognized for, what should I say, paving the groundwork for this methodology in the educational context in Iceland. So I think, that was very critical component of developing, is to find this critical friend that you can kind of play around with the language and phrasing those words. So I just wanted to respond to that.
Thank you, Kara. And then Svanborg has asked to say something.
I think
Yes,
there's
thank
one. Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Hafdís. And it's really nice to see you again. I'm looking forward to see you in real life, hopefully soon. What I have found most challenging is that some of our colleagues have been, I would like to say, a bit mocking or sarcastic about, especially when we were first trying to use these words self-study in Icelandic, because it sounded so psychological and self-centered. But now we found this way, these words that they were citing, and that gives us much more ground, but we still have a lot of ground to cover. But I think it's very much about community and cultivating the community we have to support us. And that has been and we have published much more in English than in Icelandic. And part of it has been, I think, and I feel that it's such a very supportive community, this international community. Yeah, so it's been very empowering for me to use these both languages, our Icelandic language and English.
Thank you, Svanborg. Mika?
I think there's one other issue, and that's what Megumi was talking about. I think what you need in a country is someone or a few persons who are able and can help to transform the English culture and language into the culture and language of your own country. I think you are quite right. It's nice if people come and have a lecture, but that doesn't mean that it will land in that country. So I think you need people who know the culture to help that transformation. So I really liked your contribution, Megumi. Thank you.
And Lynn, I think you had something.
Yes. I just want to make sure, Louis, I hope that you're getting your response to your question. I think it's a long-term process. And yes, there are many challenges. The important thing is if you truly believe and you want to work in self-study, is to find a community for yourself, which I know you have done. You work with Alan Ovens and Dawn and others to maintain that connection while you're trying to build something within your own language community. And I really enjoyed hearing from Karen and Svanborg and others about the process of developing that language necessary in order to be able to talk about it in your own language, and that it is sometimes a long-term process to find the right kind of phrase. I have, obviously I haven't got there yet, but it's so inspiring to hear from other people who have been able to develop that. And then what I can say is that even though my own colleagues don't necessarily feel an interest, there are some students who are interested. And so sometimes that's the way to go, is that you need to try to cultivate an interest among your graduate students or other graduate students. Give a presentation, do the best you can, and try to build, because that's the best kind of community when you have younger up and coming scholars who are interested in working with you, because that will give a future within your country. So I hope that answers some of the questions that you have. You see, the biggest challenges we have are often linguistic ones that really need time to work out, and trying to build a community when there might not be a lot of interest, but it's so important for us to remain a part of this greater community, so we do feel supported, we feel like we have a place to go to talk about our work and what's important to us.
Thank you, Lynn. Do we have maybe some time for one or two questions or just comments? I can see that Jeff says here, sharing in your own language is a key takeaway. Yes, Jeff, you got it. Somebody else want to say something? Just a comment or? I like this here. Today's sharing shows that we need to reclaim our native language.
Okay, I think Hafti's just froze. Eliza, do you want to maybe wrap up the conversation and maybe announce the winner of our drawing?
Absolutely. What a wonderful way to end this series. It was truly, truly wonderful. And I want to thank you all for coming and participating. And please take note that on Sunday, April 11th at 6:15 Eastern, so make sure you work the conversion properly, that it's the business meeting. And please come to that, because we are going to announce who wins the whole handbook from Springer. They've been super generous to us throughout this whole series, allowing us to give away books, and they're going to give away this great handbook to a lucky person. I'm very jealous, whoever it is. I will be totally impartial. It will hurt, but I'll be totally impartial. But for now, we have a wonderful, sorry, I too have a cold, a wonderful book to give away. And it goes to, is everyone ready? Mandisa. I'm not going to butcher your last name because it will be so bad, I promise. But Vandisa, who I believe commented on the chat last with that wonderful little thing for us to think about. You get a book, so you'll get an email from Julian on that. Please follow us on Facebook and Twitter. And as you can see on your screen, that's our website, and all of the webinars are posted there, as well as this one will be up there in the next day or two. So thank you for coming, and I hope that we see you on the next one, whenever that shall be.
Thank you all. Thank you so much.